It was during my wedding toast that I realized the truth about my family. Glasses raised, forced smiles, a perfect illusion until my mom grabbed the microphone. Being a mom, I've always been proud of my daughters. Emily, the bride, always so creative. She paused, the silence heavy. And Jessica, my true daughter in spirit. A brilliant doctor saving lives while some of us just doodled. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to see more stories like this. The whole hall froze. Michael, my new husband, squeezed my hand under the table. I noticed my dad lowering his eyes toward his whiskey glass. And Jessica, my perfect older sister, forcing an awkward smile as the guests kept glancing between us. I was paralyzed, trying to keep smiling as my mom continued praising how exemplary Jessica was. Her star daughter, the doctor, the one who followed in her footsteps, the one who didn't waste her potential with hobbies, as she used to call my art. When Michael got up to speak, he whispered in my ear, "It's okay. You're amazing just the way you are." But nothing was okay. It never had been. 3 weeks after the wedding, during lunch at Jessica's house, I went to the bathroom and noticed her purse open in the hallway. I hadn't planned on snooping, but an official envelope with the regional medical board's seal caught my attention. I hesitated for a few seconds, looked around the empty corridor and pulled out the paper. My heart pounded as I read, "Notice of pending suspension. Irregular prescription of opioid medications." Was our perfect Jessica illegally prescribing drugs? My sister, the family pride, the exemplary doctor that Mom always compared me to? I quickly put the letter back into her purse when I heard footsteps. Jessica appeared smiling, completely unaware of what I had just discovered. "Everything okay over there?" "Yeah," I answered, forcing a normal tone. "Just checking out your graduation photos." In the car on our way home, I couldn't stop thinking. Finally, I had something concrete, something that would prove to my mom that her perfect daughter wasn't so perfect after all. After years of comparisons, snide comments about my art career, and that humiliating speech at my wedding, finally, my revenge was within reach. Michael noticed my silence. "What are you thinking about?" "Nothing important," I lied, already planning when and how I would use this information. 2 days later, I invited Jessica for coffee. She agreed, probably thinking it would be a casual sisterly chat. "So how's the hospital?" I started, watching her stir the coffee. "Busy as always," she replied, not meeting my eyes. "Really? Nothing unusual?" "No. Complications?" Jessica looked up, confused. I pulled a copy of the letter from my purse and slid it across the table. She turned pale. "Where did you get that?" "I saw it in your purse." "Drugs, Jessica? Seriously? The golden child, Mom's pride?" "It's not what you think," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Then explain," I challenged, a bitter satisfaction welling up inside me. Jessica took a deep breath. "They're for Dad." That caught me completely off guard. "What do you mean?" "He's been suffering from chronic pain for years. The insurance dropped his coverage for medications, claiming it was unnecessary prolonged treatment. He just can't afford them out of pocket." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because he begged me not to, especially not Mom. You know how she is about appearances, about being perfect. A husband with debilitating chronic pain. Too imperfect for her taste." My triumph crumbled. "Why would he hide that?" "For the same reason you hide it when your paintings get rejected. For the same reason I hide it when I lose a patient. No one wants to disappoint Sarah Thompson, the perfect doctor, the perfect mom." The next day, I received an unexpected phone call from Margaret, an old family friend we hadn't seen in years. "Emily, we need to talk about your mom." We met in a quiet coffee shop. Margaret, now with gray hair, looked nervous. "Jessica called me. She mentioned the letter you found." "Why would she tell you that?" Margaret sighed. "Because I'm the only one who knows the truth about your mom." She pushed an old folder across the table. Inside were newspaper clippings from the university where Mom studied, and sketches. Dozens of incredible sketches signed by Sarah Thompson. "Your mom was an extraordinary artist, Emily. Just like you." I was speechless, leafing through sketches that could easily be in a gallery. "What happened?" "Your grandparents made it happen. Medicine was respectable, Art was just a hobby. She gave it all up to become a doctor. I flipped through more pages until I found a yellowed clipping. Medical students suspended for illegally distributing stimulants. Margaret continued. During her second year of residency, she began prescribing medication to help students, amphetamines mostly, so they could study more, sleep less, be perfect. How was that covered up? How is she still a doctor? Your grandfather knew influential people. The incident was wiped clean as long as Sarah never slipped up again. So my mom did the very things she's condemning Jessica for now. It's even worse, Emily. She doesn't hate your art for being different. She hates it because it's a constant reminder of what she gave up. That night, we all gathered to have dinner at Jessica's house. The tension was palpable. Dad, whom I now saw in a new light, tried to hide a grimace as he sat down. Mom criticized the table setting, the temperature of the wine. "We need to talk," I announced once everyone was seated. Jessica looked at me in panic. Mom adjusted her napkin. "About what, dear?" "About how we're a family of liars." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's in chronic pain and is hiding it from all of us. Jessica is illegally prescribing medication for him. And you, Mom, have everyone believe you were always the perfect doctor when you really abandoned a promising art career and almost lost your license for dispensing drugs. Mom dropped her fork. "Who told you these lies?" "Margaret. That old busybody should have kept her mouth shut." "Is it true then?" Dad intervened. "Emily, there are things you don't understand." "Then explain it to me. Why do we keep pretending? Why did I have to hear at my own wedding that I'm a disappointment for following my talent when you," I pointed at Mom, "made exactly the same choice as me, just going the other way?" Jessica held my hand. "She's right, Mom. This can't go on." The silence was broken by the sound of the phone ringing. Jessica answered, her face turning pale as she listened. "It was from the medical board," she announced after hanging up. "They discovered the prescriptions, and worse, someone sent documents about your old case, Mom. They want both of us there tomorrow for a preliminary hearing." Mom slumped in her chair, her entire facade of perfection crumbling before our eyes. The discovery by the medical board left us all in shock. Mom, always so composed, trembled as she tried to light a cigarette, a habit she had given up over 20 years ago. "How did they find out about me?" "Those records were sealed," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. "Does that matter now?" I asked. "What matters is what we do about it." Dad got up with difficulty, no longer able to hide his pain. "Maybe it's time to stop this act," he said, massaging his back. "Sarah, you turned our family into a never-ending contest of perfection. Look at what it's done to us." Jessica served water for everyone, her hand trembling slightly. "I have two options. I can lie and say I prescribed for imaginary patients and sell them on the black market, or I can tell the truth." "Absolutely not," Mom interrupted. "You're not going to ruin your career by confessing you prescribed for your dad." "And what's the alternative?" I fired back. "That she ruins her life with a far worse crime, that you continue hiding your past, that Dad suffers in silence forever." A heavy silence fell over us. The perfectly aligned frames on the walls of Jessica's living room seemed to watch as our family unraveled. "Look, listen," I continued, feeling years of resentment overflow. "I'm not happy about all of this happening, but maybe it had to. We've all been pretending to be something we're not, hiding parts of ourselves out of fear of not being accepted." Mom looked up, her eyes red. "You don't understand the sacrifices I made." "I know you gave up art. I saw your sketches, Mom. They were extraordinary." Something changed on her face, a mixture of pride and pain I'd never seen before. "For so long," she said slowly, "I thought I made the right choice. Medicine saves lives. Art was just self-expression. My parents made that crystal clear. And then you used your position as a doctor to help students be perfect with amphetamines," I added. "I wanted to help them. I wanted them to have what I never had, the chance to be extraordinary without having to choose." Jessica grabbed her purse and took out the bottle of pills she had been prescribing for Dad. "And I just wanted him not to suffer." Mom looked at the bottle, then at her husband of decades, as if she were really seeing him for the first time in years. Tears began streaming down her perfectly made-up face. Robert, I didn't know. How could I not see? Because I didn't want you to see, Dad replied softly. You always needed us to be perfect. Pain doesn't mix with perfection. Michael, who had been watching silently, finally spoke up. I think you all have a big decision to make before tomorrow's hearing. We looked at him, waiting. Will you keep hiding, lying, manipulating just to save appearances? Or will you finally choose the truth, no matter how imperfect and painful it might be? A strange feeling of relief began to grow inside me. It was as if a door that had been locked for decades was finally starting to open. We spent the entire night debating what to do. Jessica was making coffee, while Mom flipped through documents about her old case, discovering that someone from her past had probably kept copies of everything. The board is hardly going to be lenient, Jessica explained. Prescribing for a family member is already against medical ethics. Prescribing opioids with fake prescriptions. And your old case coming back doesn't help either, I added, looking at Mom. We can hire lawyers, Dad suggested. I have some savings. What for? I interrupted. To keep on lying? To build more layers of facade? Isn't that what got us here? Mom was silent for a moment, then got up and walked to the large window in the living room. Outside, the city glowed in the darkness. When I was a child, she began, her voice barely a whisper. My art teacher told me I had enough talent for any art school in the country. That same day, my dad grabbed my sketches and said he wouldn't spend a dime on childhood fantasies. Medicine meant respect, stability, certainty. She turned to me, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in years. When you started drawing at 5, I saw the same spark in you that I once had, and I was terrified, Emily. I didn't want you to go through the same doubts, the same financial insecurity I thought I'd face. So you decided to crush that part of me. I thought I was protecting you, she whispered, but I was projecting my own regrets. Jessica stepped closer to Mom. And what about me? I always felt like a puppet, following the path you set for me. Medicine was your passion, not mine. I do it well, but it was never really my choice. The shock on our mom's face was raw. You always seemed so happy, because it was the only way to get your love, Jessica replied, her voice breaking. Perfection or nothing. Dad got up with difficulty. I think we all need to stop pretending. I've had degenerative arthritis in my spine for 8 years. I turned down surgery because I didn't want to seem weak. The insurance cut off my medications because they decided it was addiction and not treatment. Jessica only started prescribing when she found me collapsed in the bathroom, unable to get up. I hugged my dad, noticing how thin and fragile he looked under his expensive sweater. So what are we going to do? I asked, looking at each one of them. Michael, my rock in this family storm, squeezed my hand. Maybe for the first time. The truth? Mom took a deep breath, wiping away her tears. Something had changed on her face, a determination different from her usual perfectionist rigidity, something more genuine. I'm going to tell everything. About my past, about how we swept my case under the rug. Jessica can't carry this alone, and I'll admit that I prescribed for Dad, Jessica added. Better to lose my license temporarily than permanently by lying. And you, Dad? I asked. I'm going to get proper treatment. I'm done suffering in silence. I looked at these 3 people who had made me feel inadequate for so long, and for the first time, I saw not these perfect, intimidating figures, but real human beings, deeply imperfect, scared, and finally brave. I also have something to offer, I said, an idea forming. A way to show the board what this pressure for perfection does to people. The courtroom of the Regional Medical Board was exactly as I'd imagined. Cold, impersonal, with a long table where 5 senior doctors stared at us with severe expressions. I brought my drawing supplies, ignoring the confused looks from the board members. Dr. Winters, the committee president, began formally. We are here to investigate serious allegations against Dr. Jessica Wilson for fraudulent opioid prescriptions and to re-examine the case of Dr. Sarah Thompson from 1989 concerning unauthorized distribution of amphetamines to students. Jessica squeezed my hand under the table. Mom maintained her stiff posture, but her eyes betrayed her fear. Before you proceed, I interrupted, standing up. "I'd like to show the committee something." Dr. Winters frowned. "Miss Wilson, this isn't an art gallery." "No, but this is a tribunal of moral judgment, and I believe this is relevant." I set up my easel and started to draw quickly. In swift, precise strokes, I sketched two figures, one of a doctor in a lab coat who looked impeccable on the outside but shattered on the inside, and an artist covered by layers of self-doubt and criticism, but with a bright inner core. "My sister and I grew up under impossible pressure," I explained as I drew. "Perfection wasn't a goal. It was the minimum acceptable." I continued drawing, adding my dad hunched over in pain, hiding his suffering behind a smile. This is the real issue here. It's not just about opioids or amphetamines. It's about what we do when society tells us that our pain, our struggles, our imperfections are unacceptable. The board members watched in silence. One adjusted his glasses to get a better look. My mom gave up her extraordinary artistic talent because she was taught it wasn't valuable. Then she used her profession to help others maintain facades of perfection. My sister prescribed medication for our dad because his suffering was considered inconvenient by the healthcare system. And I spent my whole life believing I was inadequate because I chose art over medicine. I finished the drawing with swift strokes, showing our family finally looking at one another without masks. This isn't a defense of what was done. It's context, an explanation. Dr. Winters cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "We appreciate your artistic presentation, but we need the facts." Mom then stood up, her voice firmer than I had ever heard it. "The facts are these. In 1989, I started providing amphetamines to medical students, not for profit, but because I believed I was helping them. My dad used his influence to cover up the case, on the condition that I never commit any ethical breach again. I kept that promise for 35 years. She paused, looking directly at the board members. "But I made other mistakes. I pressured my daughters to be perfect replicas of myself. I ignored my husband's suffering because it didn't fit the image I had built. And that's why my daughter Jessica, an excellent doctor, felt she had no choice but to prescribe for her dad." Then Jessica spoke up. "I won't deny that I forged prescriptions. I did it solely for my dad, whose health plan denied coverage for his legitimate condition. It was wrong, unethical, and I'm prepared to face the consequences." "Doctor," Winters conferred briefly with his colleagues. "And what about Mr. Wilson? Where does he fit in this family situation?" As if on cue, Dad entered the room leaning on an ornate cane, something we had never seen him use in public. "I'm here to confirm my daughter's testimony and to take responsibility for my part," he said. "I turned down alternative treatments out of pride. I turned down surgery. I hid the severity of my condition. Jessica only began prescribing when she found me on the bathroom floor, unable to get up." A heavy silence filled the room. One of the board members, Dr. Chen, finally spoke. "In 30 years on this board, I've never seen an entire family come forward to accept collective responsibility." Dr. Winters adjusted his glasses. "That doesn't change the gravity of the infractions." "No," I agreed, "but it should influence how you handle them. We stand before you not to ask for clemency, but to show that we are breaking a toxic cycle. We are choosing the truths instead of appearances." Dr. Chen looked back at my drawing. "Impressive work, Miss Wilson." "Thank you. It's for an exhibition I'm putting together. It's called Perfect Mirrors, about how our facades rarely reflect who we really are." Dr. Winters then asked us to leave so the board could deliberate. In the corridor, Mom took my hand. "Your drawing, was it how you've always seen me?" "No," I answered honestly. "It's like I finally can see all of us. Imperfect, broken in places, but real. For the first time in my adult life, I saw a genuine smile on my mom's face. Not that calculated smile she used at social events, but something vulnerable and true. Your art has always been extraordinary, Emily. I'm sorry I couldn't see that sooner." 3 months passed after the hearing at the medical board. The consequences were severe but fair. Jessica received a 6-month suspension and 2 years of strict supervision. Mom faced an investigation into her old case, resulting in 100 hours of community service and having to lecture medical students about professional ethics. But within our family, the changes were even deeper. On a rainy afternoon, I found Mom in the basement of the house where I grew up. She was kneeling in front of an old chest that we were never allowed to open. "Emily, I'm glad you're here," she said without turning around. "I wanted to show you something." The chest was open, revealing stacks of sketchbooks, dried out paint tubes, and a charcoal case that looked untouched for decades. "I kept everything," she explained, running a hand over a sketchbook. "Even after I decided to give up art, I couldn't let it go." I sat beside her on the dusty floor, flipping through the sketchbooks. Each page revealed a side of Sarah Thompson I'd never known, a young woman with bold lines, vibrant colors, and originality that left me breathless. "You were amazing," I murmured. "You were passionate," she gently corrected. "Just like you are." She handed me a particularly worn notebook. This was my visual diary during art school. I used to draw in secret, usually in the middle of the night. The pages told a story of internal struggle. Detailed illustrations of endless staircases, caged birds, masks with cracks. It was the visual diary of someone suffocating her true identity. "So you hated seeing me draw so much?" She closed her eyes for a moment. "I didn't hate it, Emily. I was jealous. You had the courage I lacked." In that moment, I realized that maybe Mom and I weren't so different after all. Both artists, one who followed her path despite the odds, the other who abandoned hers out of fear. "I started drawing again," she confessed, showing me a new sketchbook hidden under the old ones. "Nothing extraordinary, but it's helping me process everything." Her recent drawings were different, more raw, more emotional. One depicted Dad with his cane, not hiding his frailty, but showing it with dignity. Another showed Jessica in her lab coat, not as the perfect doctor, but as a complex woman burdened by an invisible weight. And there was one of me in my studio, completely absorbed in the creative process. "These are—" my voice trailed off. "They're real," she finished. "For the first time in decades, I'm seeing you all as you really are, not as I once thought you should be." That very same day, we visited Dad during his physiotherapy session. After the hearing, he finally agreed to the surgery he'd been avoiding. The recovery was slow, but he was making progress. "How's the prep for your exhibition going?" he asked carefully as he exercised his back. "Almost done. Actually, I came to invite both of you to a special preview tomorrow." Mom looked surprised. "I thought the official opening was next week." "The official opening, yes, but I want my family to see it first." On the way home, I called Jessica. She was working as a volunteer at a community clinic for drug addicts, part of her penance, as she called it, though it was secretly changing her view of medicine. "How's your work going?" I asked. "Honestly, it's killing me," she laughed. "How do you manage to turn something so ugly into something so beautiful?" "I don't make it pretty," I explained. "I just show the beauty that already exists in imperfection." That night I stayed in the studio, finishing the centerpiece for the exhibition, a large panel I titled "The Wilson Family Unfiltered." It was the first time I painted all of us together, not as we wanted to be seen, but as we really were, full of cracks, scars, and unexpected beauty. Michael stepped in quietly, bringing tea. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" "I think we all are at last." He looked around the studio filled with works that portrayed not only my family, but dozens of other people, friends, strangers who agreed to pose, each revealing their imperfections, their struggles, their unconventional beauty. "Who would have thought that your disastrous wedding would bring us here?" He smiled, wrapping an arm around me from behind. "Sometimes things have to fall apart before you can rebuild something real," I replied, contemplating the final painting. On it, Mom was no longer the impeccable doctor, but an artist rediscovering her passion. Jessica wasn't the perfect daughter, but a woman finding her own way. Dad wasn't the stubborn patriarch, but a man brave enough to show vulnerability. And I wasn't the misfit daughter anymore, but an artist capturing the truth behind the facades. "Perfect mirrors," I whispered, signing the canvas, "because our imperfections are the only true reflections we have." The gallery was quiet when my family arrived the following afternoon. Michael had helped organize everything perfectly, lighting that highlighted each piece, small descriptions that hinted but didn't explain too much, leaving the images to speak for themselves. "Emily, this is..." Jessica was left speechless as she entered, taking in the walls filled with paintings and drawings. Dad walked slowly with his cane, stopping in front of each piece. His eyes filled with tears when he saw his own portrait, not hiding his pain, but showing the dignity of facing it openly. Mom stood still at the entrance, as if she couldn't bring herself to move forward. "It's all right," I encouraged, taking her hand. "Come on." I guided her through the exhibition, watching her reactions. Every piece told the story of imperfection transformed into authenticity: a recovering addict showcasing needle scars, a breast cancer survivor revealing her mastectomy, a veteran proudly displaying his prosthetic limbs. "These people," Mom murmured, "all agreed to be shown like this. So exposed." "They're not exposed, they're liberated," I replied softly. "Everyone here spent their lives hiding something they thought was unacceptable, imperfect, shameful. By letting me capture those parts of them, they found acceptance." Jessica stopped in front of her own portrait, a diptych showing her in her flawlessly white lab coat on one side and on the other, sitting alone in a dark room surrounded by crumpled prescriptions. "Is that really how you saw me? So divided?" "It's how we all were. Divided between who we really are and who we thought we needed to be." We continued until we reached the end of the gallery, where the huge family panel covered an entire wall. Mom brought her hand to her mouth, tears streaming freely. "It's the first time you painted us together," she observed. "It's the first time I was able to see us clearly." As we stood there in silence, the gallery door opened. An elderly lady entered, leaning on an ornate cane. "Professor Brooks!" Mom exclaimed, recognizing her immediately. Nancy Brooks, the art teacher who had encouraged Mom decades ago, smiled warmly. "Sarah Thompson, or should I say Dr. Wilson now? Margaret told me I should come." The two women looked at each other for a long moment, the mentor and the former student who had given up art. "Do you remember," Mom whispered, "what you told me when I decided to give up art?" "I said that talent doesn't disappear," Nancy replied. "It just waits patiently to be rediscovered." Then the teacher turned her attention to me. "And you must be Emily. Margaret was right. Your work is extraordinary." "Thank you," I replied, noticing the look of admiration Mom directed toward her old mentor. "You know," Nancy continued, surveying the exhibition, "in my 60 years of teaching art, I've learned that the greatest artists aren't the technically perfect ones, but those who have the courage to show the truth. And truth is rarely beautiful in the conventional sense." She stopped in front of Mom's portrait, half-respected doctor, half-silenced artist, and smiled. "It's never too late, Sarah." Something seemed to resolve on Mom's face. She picked up a pencil from her purse. She always carried one now, and stepped closer to the giant family panel. "May I?" she asked, looking at me. I nodded, intrigued. In the lower corner of the canvas, next to my signature, she carefully added, "Sarah T." Not her married name, but her identity as an artist, re-emerging after decades. "Co-creator," she explained with a timid smile. "After all, I helped shape this family for better or worse." Jessica came over and embraced us. Perfectly imperfect. Dad joined in, his eyes shining with a mix of pride and emotion I had never seen before. My family of artists. Michael discreetly snapped a picture of that moment. Unposed, unscripted, just genuine. 2 days later, the exhibition Perfect Mirrors opened to the public. Critics called it brutally honest, cathartic, and revolutionary in its celebration of imperfection. But the real impact wasn't in the newspaper headlines. It was in the woman who thanked me for showing her cesarean scar as a mark of courage rather than a flaw. It was in the teenager who finally revealed his self-harm scars to his parents after seeing my exhibition. It was in Jessica, discovering that she wanted to work permanently with drug addicts. It was in Dad, finally discussing his chronic pain openly with his friends. And it was in Mom, who started teaching art classes to seniors in the local community. On the exhibition's closing night, I found her quietly observing the huge family panel. "At my wedding," I commented, "you made a toast where you called Jessica your true daughter." She closed her eyes, ashamed. "I was so wrong, so blind." The funny thing, I continued, is that terrible moment brought us here. If you hadn't hurt me so deeply, I might never have had the courage to confront our family. Sometimes you have to break completely to see who you really are, she reflected, echoing my own words. We stayed side by side, watching our imperfect reflections in the glass that protected the painting. Mother and daughter, both artists, finally seeing each other clearly. Emily, she said softly, you've always been my true daughter. I just couldn't admit how much you reminded me of who I should have had the courage to be. I smiled, feeling decades of hurt finally beginning to heal. It's never too late, I replied, echoing Professor Brooks's words. It's never too late to be who we really are. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to see more stories like this.